Hello everyone. So, I'll start by thanking the organizers for giving me this nice opportunity to speak over here. So I will be talking about the work which is about studying the control mechanical response in glasses by designing a spatial inhomogeneity by using some protocols. So this work has been done with Pinaki Chaudhary at IISc and Jürgen Horbach at University of Düsseldorf. So very recently Pinaki talked about a special type of deformation protocol based on expansion of the material. So I will be mostly talking about those type of protocols where system is deformed using some fixed shear rates. So if we see the deformation of amorphous materials in general, so we see various types of inhomogeneous patterns emerge. For example, in this experiment of metallic glasses, when the deformation stops, you can see that some part of the material deforms more than some other parts of the material, and you can see that some band-like structure emerge, which is called shear band. Similarly, in these experiments of deformation of colloids, you can see where particles are actually color coded as per their velocity. So these red particles that you are seeing, they are moving faster than other particles. So here again you see some shear bands which form, and such observation of shear bands have been done in various computer simulations, as you can see some shear band here. So in general, it's very difficult to predict the nucleation of the shear band. Is actually some stochastic kind of process, and still it has not been completely possible to see the structure before the deformation to start to predict that where shear band is going to emerge. So now the question is like, if we cannot predict, so can we control the nucleation and growth of such shear bands? So there have been a couple of studies. For example, in this study, people try to introduce porosity into the glass to control the shear band patterns. As you can see, with the increase in the porosity, there is a control over the formation of shear band from the tilted one to horizontal one. And similarly, people use people introduce voids and to actually control that where the shear band to initiate. And in recent studies, people have actually prepared well annealed glasses, and there they introduce some synthetic soft regions which are actually calibrated at slightly higher temperature, and under deformation they found that shear band nucleation actually happens from these synthetic regions. So my way of designing inhomogeneous glass to control the shear band formation is based on applying a temperature gradient pulse. We have done molecular dynamic simulation using a binary Lagrange glass former. For that, the glass transition temperature is close to 0.3. So our protocol is something like this. We prepare a glass at temperature 0.2, which is below the glass transition temperature, and then after here you can see the density into the material is roughly homogeneous. But when we apply a temperature gradient by having the middle end at the same temperature 0.2, but the other ends at slightly higher temperature at different temperature like 0.5, 0.4, and so on. Then we see that near the ends melting type of thing happens and the density decreases, and these are the three curves for different time for which the temperature gradient is on. So melting continues as you keep the temperature gradient on, and ultimately you get some inhomogeneous profile. But interesting thing happens when you remove this temperature gradient, again returning back to the same temperature 0.2. So the inhomogeneities which have been actually developed into the material somehow freezes into the material, and even in the absence of temperature gradient you can see the inhomogeneous density profiles. So first thing is to notice here that that we have checked actually that these inhomogeneous profiles are very stable over long period of time, and this is something very similar you have some laser light and you shine it over some metallic glass, and this causes some local melting leading to some large scale mass movement, and ultimately when you remove this laser, so this large mass scale movement which has happened here is actually frozen. So you can see here the density inhomogeneity that we have got after removing the temperature gradient for different temperature gradients that we apply, and you can see some hump like structure is developed in particular in between the hotter and colder region, and you can see that some structural changes has happened leading to also change in the spatial potential energy into the sample. So this order of inhomogeneity that we get into the material depends on two things. First is the which temperature gradient, how big or how small temperature gradient that you apply, and how long you keep the temperature gradient on. So also it depends that which temperature gradient you are applying. So you can see that different sort of energy profiles you are getting. So this is actually whether it's melting. If temperature is very high or temperature is not very high, it can lead to some rejuvenation like up behavior. So we have been able to prepare a specially inhomogeneous class at temperature 0.2. Now our goal is to understand what is the pathway of failure in such inhomogeneous materials. So we have inhomogeneity along g direction, and we shear the xg plane in the x direction by maintaining the temperature at 0.2 using DPD thermostat. And just briefly, I will mention this macroscopic behavior. You can see already there is some change in the yielding behavior of the material. But you can see the important thing is that these materials, inhomogeneous materials, are reaching a steady state. This is the average potential energy of the sample at very, very long like time. You can see the strain values are too high. These are the homogeneous materials which have not been exposed, and they reach the steady state very quickly as expected. So important thing is the microscopic response, for which we have plotted the shear bands by measuring the mobility, which is actually measuring the square displacement of each particle. These are the cases for which we have not applied any temperature gradient. These are homogeneous sample, and these are the sample where there is some inhomogeneities there because of the temperature gradients like this we have applied. And you can see there is a particular type of pattern of shear bands that we can see. For example, in these cases, you can see the shear band nucleates in between the material near the hotter end, near the colder end, and here near the hotter end at the boundaries. And just to characterize that how much control do we have over the formation of such shear bands, we plot this, we do this scatter plot. So here on the y-axis you have this mobility, which is actually the mobility at a strain value of 0.1, and this is the fluctuation is the potential energy per particle with respect to the average potential energy of the sample. So these are the states or the particles which are having high energy, and you can see for these particles mobility is higher. So these are the particles where the for higher in a highly energetic particle, which are actually where the shear band initiation is happening. So this is the movie. So you can see this unprocessed sample where no temperature gradient has been applied. So here the shear band nucleation randomly happens into the sample and goes to a steady state very quickly, the completely homogeneous one. And here it takes very long time to go to the steady state, and you can already see some pattern. For example, shear band initiates near the boundary. So now just to understand how much control do we have over the formation of these patterns of the shear bands in homogeneous samples. So we have done some study where we start with the same initial configuration of the sample, but during the deformation protocol we have applied the DPD thermostat, which I already mentioned. So here we change the noise, nature of the noise of the thermostat, and we see that these inhomogeneous patterns roughly same for different samples starting with the same configuration, as you can see here, here, but for this case where no temperature gradient has been applied, this actually a shear band initiation happens at random locations. So just to briefly mention that we have also used another protocol based on inhomogeneous annealing. So we apply a hybrid swap Monte Carlo and molecular dynamics type of technique. So here we do swap Monte Carlo, which is actually exchanging the diameters of the particle to allow higher, faster annealing in the middle of the sample, but just doing molecular dynamics only near the boundary, no swap. So this allows this faster annealing in the middle, and in particular in this state you can see that density is roughly not changing much as in compared to the previous case, and here there is inhomogeneity mostly in terms of the potential energy, and here these are the poorly annealed states and these are well annealed. Everywhere the swap has been applied to reach this particular state, and here also, and in this case the band initiation happens randomly, but here again you can see there is a pattern for different wells that we have here in terms of formation of the shear bands. So just to conclude, we have two different type of protocols, one based on temperature gradient, another based on inhomogeneous annealing, and in both the cases we have heterogeneous samples where we have a control over the formation of the shear band. So thanks for your kind attention.
If no questions, let's thank the
Yeah.
speaker.
Between the processed and unprocessed, and why does it have shear banding in one of them? What was the
So,
reason for that?
so in both the cases there is shear band, but in unprocessed sample where we have not applied temperature gradient, this is the homogeneous sample. There is no inhomogeneity in the density. So here shear band initiates at different. I mean, you can't say where it is going to initiate. But in the process sample where we have applied the temperature gradient, so depending on this type of temperature gradients that you apply, you have a control whether shear band initiation is going to happen in the middle or near the boundaries.